An abridged history of the tallest buildings in the Midwest. We can sketch them out, the records we almost have. For instance, the horizon behind the horizon. If you watch a sunset, then climb up the tallest ladder you can find, you can see another sunset, at least for a moment. For instance, all the buildings that we imagined could be here. When I talk about imaginary buildings, I'm talking about ghosts, all the former selves who got off the train at an early stop and stayed there. The selves you forgot about, but found one afternoon looking at the old books you keep in your parents' house. I'm talking about myths, slight religion, the images that fill guidebooks and postcards and the lips of strangers. These are dreams. Don't mistake them for what's real. I want to tell you a small history about tall buildings. This history skews west, towards Illinois and North Dakota and Kansas, but I hope that it can mean something to you all here in Michigan. Michigan is my home state, but it is not Illinois or North Dakota or Kansas or where I currently live. I've spent the last 4 years thinking about the word Midwest and if that word means anything, and I think it does. This is physics. Everything in the universe has a resonant frequency. And so, if I sing just the right note in Chicago, there's an empty lot in Cleveland where the grasses sway back and forth. There's a rumble strip on I-75 that sings the color blue. There's a book of lines between places, and it's written in sand dunes. It's written in conversation, it's written in histories. Tonight's history will take place in 3 parts. 1, an imaginary building. 2, a hole in the ground. 3, a building that is not a building. This history is incomplete. It is abridged. It goes like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
We can sketch them out, the records we almost have. For instance, the horizon behind the horizon. If you watch a sunset, then climb up to the tallest ladder you can find. You can see another sunset, at least for a moment. For instance, all the buildings we imagined could be here. When I talk about imaginary buildings, I'm talking about ghosts. All the former selves who got off the train at an early stop and stayed there, the selves you forgot about, but found one afternoon looking at the old books you keep at your parents' house. I'm talking about myths, slight religion, the images that fill guidebooks and postcards and the lips of strangers. These are dreams. Don't mistake them for what's real. I want to tell you a small history about tall buildings. The history skews toward Illinois and North Dakota and Kansas, but I hope it can mean something to you all here. I wonder about the word Midwest, and if that word means anything. I think it does. This is physics. Everything in the universe has a resonant frequency, and if I sing just the right note in Chicago, there is an open lot in Cleveland where the grasses sway back and forth. There is a rumble strip on I-75 that sings the color blue. There's a book of lines between places, and it's written in sand dunes, written in conversation, it's written in histories. Tonight's history will take place in 3 parts. 1, an imaginary building. 2, a hole in the ground. 3, a building that is not a building. This history is incomplete. It is abridged. It goes like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
I want to talk about histories because I want to talk about the place where I'm from. Let's start there. A 3-part abridged history of the tallest buildings in the Midwest. 1. The Illinois. The first tallest building in the Midwest is imaginary. Proposed by Frank Lloyd Wright in 1956 on Frank Lloyd Wright Day in Chicago, as declared by Mayor Daley. There is a public ceremony at the Sherman House Hotel ballroom. Wright is in attendance and brings a banner that stretches from the ceiling to the floor, 22 feet. It's a sketch for a new project. No one has asked him to do this. There is no funding, no site, no public support. It's a drawing of a skyscraper. The skyscraper is a mile high, the tallest building in the world. 528 stories, 130,000 tenants, 56 atomic elevators, garages for 15,000 cars, 2 helipads for 50 helicopters each. The skyscraper is called the Illinois. I love to hear that name. The Illinois. It's monstrous. It's stupefying. It's ridiculous.
There's something I love about my home, and that is when I tell my mom that I'm reading about Toledo, she asks back to me, why? And I am as guilty of this as anyone, of selling ourselves short. I'm trying to relearn how to answer that question, because Toledo is beautiful and is the place I was born. Because Chicago is beautiful and is the place I live. But I'm still trying to figure these places out. I bought a shirt, but I don't know how to wear it. I bought ambition, I found it, but I don't know how to see it through. The innovation Frank Lloyd Wright proposed in the drawing of the Illinois was a new method of building that he called the taproot system, where a skyscraper would stand because of a very long mast shoved deep into the earth, and all the floors of the building would cantilever off of it. This is actually pretty close to how grasses in the prairie stand so tall. It is an idea that resembles organic architecture, that magical phrase that Wright often invoked, building into the earth, not just onto it, creating with place and not simply at place, context as collaborator. And yet, as of this performance, the current tallest building in the world is just over half a mile high. A mile high Illinois, especially in 1956, is a fever dream. It's a publicity stunt, is the problem. Let's not read too much into the logistics of the situation. We're here for a history, and here it is. Frank Lloyd Wright hated cities. He advocated for his singularly weird vision of suburban sprawl. Wright was a socialite, a publicity fiend. He loved the needlessly provocative, so let's not trust him for the tallest building in the Midwest. Instead, let's read into the poetry of the fever dream. The Midwest does not contain mountains. Flatness is our great water. We are students of subtle deviations in the landscape. Illinois is a word that comes from a verb meaning to speak the regular way. Our tallest building is an icon of holy smallness, holy unchanging, holy gridded streets flung into the air. Outside of the invisible building, we stand waiting for everything that has ever been written down to come true. 2. The spire.
The second tallest building in the Midwest is the opposite of a building. And the opposite of a building is a hole in the ground. The story I've been told goes like this. There was a plan that everyone was secretly looking a little forward to, which involved the construction of a new tallest building called the Chicago Spire. It would wrest the title of tallest building in America away from New York City and back to Chicago. And Chicago has always had a little bit of a chip on its shoulder about New York City, and so this would be a symbolic victory, and it would feel good. The Chicago Spire was planned to be a little less tall than the Burj Khalifa in Dubai, so it wouldn't quite be the tallest building in the world, but it would make up for it by at least being the tallest in the Western Hemisphere. The plan was ill-fated, though. Construction began in 2007, and it was a hole pressed into the ground downtown. It was construction workers, and it was photo ops, and it was foundations, and it was suddenly 2008, and the economy slumped. It was a hole in the ground. Suddenly the plan was lost capital, and lost political will, and a public embarrassment, a shorthand for the housing crisis and municipal dysfunction, and the fact that we couldn't get even this done, the thing that Chicago is known for, skyscrapers. What's more is that they had finished the hole for the foundation, but only that. And so we were left with a bitter reminder floating next to the high-rises of downtown, like a dead houseplant you can't bring yourself to throw out. Like an ex-lover's coffee cup quietly stalking out space on your end table. An inverse monument. The screeching of the highway nearby.
distance has no way making love understandable. Cheer up, honey, I hope you can. There is something wrong with me. My mind is filled with silvery stars. Honey kisses clouds of fog. Picking apples for the kings and queens of things I've never seen. Oh, distance has no way making love understandable. 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 Cheer up, honey, I hope you can.
Let's talk a bit more about regionalism. There's something a little too diminutive, too folksy or one-dimensional to say that the Midwest is filled with humility and no-nonsense people. In my experience, the region is much messier than that. It's queer and dystopic and racist and transcendent and urban and strained. It's a boring narrative, the one that we've inherited. What's worse is how untrue it is. Instead of heartland values, I'm much more interested in a kind of honest Midwestern fatalism, an oscillation between regional boosterism and a learned sense of flyover country, the feeling that everyone has entirely passed us by. There are different strands of this. Lauren in Detroit, still incredulous about people moving here. Nicole in Toledo, confused by a new coffee shop going in. They both give Chicago a healthy dose of big city skepticism, and fair enough. But Chicago has its own particular version. I have learned the sigh that translates to, they moved to Los Angeles, and that was better for their career. And a hole in the ground doesn't get you anywhere in the city anyway, especially not Chicago, a place that looks at shifts in altitude like they're distasteful. It reminds me of walking in a prairie in Kansas, and how few trees there are. A prairie balks at a tree, doesn't reject it outright, but is a little hesitant about it. The prairie only lets a few trees grow, only letting a little bit of shade creep in, and we can't have too many trees grow in the prairie anyway. It wrecks the whole ecosystem. It doesn't make sense with all the tall grass and the beetles and the bison and the ants and the tiny little prairie stream curling through acres and acres of space that seems not to have human beings in it, not anywhere, not as far as you can see, not to the horizon, and you think, not past that. There are horizons
And then there are horizons beyond that if you shift your perspective to be higher up. And that is the opposite of a conversation, although just as intimate. Three, the mast.
I'm going to confess something to you. There are places I have never been, and Blanchard, North Dakota is one of them. Blanchard has become something of a mecca in my mind, a place of intense Midwestern holiness. The site of pilgrimage is just a little bit west of town, the KVLY television mast.
The KVLY TV mast is the tallest thing in all of the Western Hemisphere, and as of this performance, the fifth tallest thing in the world. It is not a building. The third tallest building in the Midwest is not a building.
You look hard enough at anything and you'll find the limits of language crawling within it. Arguments over classification and Guinness records and the definitions of increasingly specific varieties. But there's a particularly tragic bureaucracy that concerns itself with what a building is. I've always imagined all those bureaucrats and architects and project managers all got together one evening and, over cigarettes and oranges, eventually decided that a building is something that stands.
The KVLY TV mast doesn't stand, it sort of hangs. It's supported by beams stretching down to the ground, and this disqualifies it from being considered a building. And because of this technicality, almost no one knows about North Dakota's fifth tallest thing in the world. Almost everyone knows about Dubai. Our record is impressive, but we haven't been good about publicity. The tree outside of my bedroom window bears fruit that I know is safe to eat, but I've never reached out to try its berries.
Tallest buildings get remembered, written up, archived. And there is power in choosing something as arbitrary as tallness, but I'm ignoring the most fundamental question. When the tall building gets built, who gets to go in? Who does it serve? Skylines are iconic, but icons are only so useful. Images aren't houses. Myths can't nourish. They go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. When I talk about imaginary buildings, I'm imagining us looking up at them. I'm fantasizing about the train stop that's not mine and the ghosts who live in my old books. When I talk about imaginary buildings, I'm talking about the tattoo of the Minneapolis skyline on the bicep of a stranger, the flag of my home state pinned to the wall. I'm talking about the Renaissance Center viewed from the river, cold and mystifying and unreal and all too real. I'm talking about symbols of the place, the mythologies of cities, regions, countries. These are useful, but only so much. A tall building deserves our praise no more than an anthill does. Let us sing praise to the anthill. Let us hold skepticism and zealotry in our hearts. Let us say no to floors, no to helicopters, no to systems, no to continuous horizontality, no to spires, no to glory, no to names, no to self-effacement, no to homogeneity, no to buildings, no to what's not real, only a straight line up and a straight line across, only wholly unchanging and wholly grid flung into the air, only the Midwest, only the people, only the fifth tallest thing in the world, and it goes 1, 2, 3, 4,
5, 1, 2, 3, 4. 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 5, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4. Consider heliocentrism, a word for frame of reference. If you can put the sun at the center of the solar system, you can put anything, any point in North Dakota, as the center. And if you climb up a television mast at dusk, you can see the sunset over and over again.
We've got the stupid plans in the drawer for the tallest building in the world. We've got a hole in the ground for it. We can sketch them out, the dreams we keep, the records we almost have.
Signals from the KVLY television mast are sent up all over the sky, out into space, most of them small, entirely and lovingly mundane.